Hi, I'm Ramindu Deshapriya on behalf of the Sustainable Education Foundation, and welcome to our Q&A session on Google Summer of Code. Now, we got a lot of questions on our Twitter handle related to this topic, and so I'll start off by answering some of the most generic questions that we got, like what is open source, what is Google Summer of Code, and so on and so forth. So just to give a quick introduction on open source and Google Summer of Code, open source software is basically software that the source code is available to everyone. So if you think about a bunch of different software applications that you use, think about software like Microsoft Windows or maybe Adobe Photoshop, software like that. The source code is not available for anyone to look at or modify. But with open source software, again, the software that you might be using, things like Mozilla Firefox, VLC Media Player, all of those software, the code of the software is actually available for anyone to take and modify and then redistribute as they see fit. So basically, open source software is where the code of the software is available to anyone, so that you can build your own software using that, or you can modify existing software. And Google Summer of Code is basically a program run by Google every year for university students, where they encourage university students to contribute to open source software. So basically, if you were participating in Google Summer of Code, you'd be working on open source software, building that software or building new features into that software. So another thing that you need to remember about open source software and Google Summer of Code is that all of these software applications or open source software is maintained by different organizations. So for example, Mozilla Firefox is maintained by the Mozilla Foundation. Software like if you know about Apache servers or other Apache software, everything is maintained by the Apache Software Foundation. So you get a bunch of different organizations like this that are not directly affiliated with Google, but what Google does is they ask these organizations to hand out projects to university students, and then on completion of these projects, Google will actually pay those university students. And they do actually pay quite a bit for this as well, something in the range of about $3,000 to $4,000. Actually, from this year onwards, they've slightly reduced the amount for South Asian students and students in some countries. So, but still, it's a really big amount, so it's quite worth doing a project. So a couple of other important points to remember about Summer of Code is, like I said, you'll be working for an open source software organization, building open source software, and you need to be registered as a university student to participate. And of course, you'll be working on project ideas given to you by those open source software organizations. So also another thing to remember is that the duration of this is about 3 months. And so the application period for GSOC 2017 has already started. Another couple of important points is, so how it works is you need to send in an application for a project idea provided by the open source organization, and then based on that you will get evaluated and selected, and you will get the chance to work for 3 months on that open source software. The payment will of course be given at the point of selection. You will be given a certain amount of the full payment, and then at the halfway point there'll be an evaluation, and they'll pay you half of the amount, and then the rest they will pay at the end after a final evaluation. Okay, so that's a very basic introduction. And of course, another thing to remember is that Sri Lanka has been one of the top contenders, one of the top countries that have had the Google Summer of Code students for the past 10 to 12 years. So we've been in the top 10 countries for all of those years. And another thing to mention is that the University of Moratuwa very consistently had the most number of students in all the world from a single university for about a period of 10 years. But that changed about a couple of years back, where universities in India started coming up. But anyway, Sri Lanka has been one of the major contributors of students to the Google Summer of Code program. So Actually, on the 10th anniversary of Google Summer of Code, the program officers who run this program at Google visited Sri Lanka and held quite a few events here as well to honor the fact that we've been one of the top 10 countries who've had GSOC students in the past. Okay, so we'll get to some of the other questions that we got on our Twitter handle. So one of the questions was, is there an age limit for GSOC? Actually, there is not. The only main requirement is that you need to be enrolled as a university student. And we got a live question right now. Can we submit multiple applications for different organizations to GSOC? Yeah, of course, you can apply to multiple organizations. So the important thing to remember is that some of these organizations will have very intensive selection processes where you will need to put quite a bit of focus on it. So the maximum number of applications I'd recommend on applying for is about 2. So if you can apply for 2 organizations, that would be enough, because you need to focus really well to get a successful application through. Some of the other questions we got on our Twitter handle were, how do I start with a proposal for Google Summer of Code? So how this works is, there's a very strict, not a strict process, but a process that you need to follow if you want to be successful in your application. So basically you would need to engage with the community. So you have to remember that all of these open source communities are mostly people who are volunteers, or they are working for free most of the time. Most of them are. So they are not getting paid to actually work on this open source software. So it's important to engage with this community, because these communities really depend on how much the people in the community interact with each other and how well they work together, because the community will be spread out over a large geographical area. They'll be in different countries. So these Summer of Code mentoring organizations will definitely consider how well you interact with the community. So to start off with a GSOC project, you'd probably need to go to their site. Just search for Google Summer of Code 2017 on Google, and the first result you get would probably be the Google Summer of Code site. If you go to that, you can see the list of mentoring organizations that will be mentoring projects this year. So you can choose one of those. So the easiest way to choose one of those is to there's a filter where you can filter based on technology. So if you're interested in PHP, you can just search for PHP, and you'll get the list of organizations that have PHP-based project ideas listed. So you can just choose one of those mentoring organizations and go into their ideas list. They'll have an idea list posted somewhere. So you can look at an idea that you're interested in, and then each organization will have different communication channels like online chat, email, mailing lists, things like that. So you'd need to go on one of these communication channels and introduce yourself and express your interest in applying for that particular project idea. So a general template I recommend for this is introduce yourself saying, okay, I'm a third year student at the University of Morocco or whatever university you're in, and then tell them what experience you have in this particular technology. Just say, okay, this is a PHP project. I've been working in PHP for 3 years. I've done these projects. Just introduce yourself that way, and then say I am interested in this project idea, and I believe that my experience would help me in completing this project. And then, of course, the important thing is to mention that you've already started working with that particular open source organization software. So if it's something like Mozilla Firefox, you can say I got the nightly build of Mozilla Firefox and now I built it. If you came into an issue when you were building it, you can ask a question related to that, or you can ask a question related to how you move forward with the project. Do you think this is the best way to do it? This is my approach to doing this project. Is this the best thing to do? And if you send an email like that initially, the mentor for that particular project idea will reply saying, okay, this is what you need to do, this is how you do it, and that will be your first engagement with the community. Actually, most open source organizations require you to actually fix some bugs, maybe fix some issues that are on the issue tracker, or to do some meaningful contribution before you're considered eligible to apply. So whatever open source organization you choose, you might have to go on the issue list, look at a few bugs and fix them. So it doesn't need to be really complicated, because, for example, the first bug I ever fixed on a Google Summer of Code project that I did was fixing some HTML tags. So fixing the colors on some HTML tags, and that was for the Sana Software Foundation, and I got selected to do Summer of Code with them as well. So the initial work that you do for the organization doesn't need to be really complicated. It's just to show that you're interested in doing this and you're capable of doing it. And then the mentors will also be interested in considering you as a candidate. Okay, we got a couple of live questions. So the multiple applications for different organizations, that question I answered. So basically you can, but I'd recommend sticking to only 2 applications. So someone, Jude Niroshan, wants to know, he said it's a bit hard to set timelines in the proposal as we don't have an entire idea about those projects listed. So of course most organizations will require you to give it's a very loose timeline that they require. It's not a strict timeline. So you can just based on a task breakdown that you can generate. So the thing is, you really need to get a feel for the project that you need to do, right? It's not just you read the project idea and then submit a proposal. You need to continuously engage with the community, always talk to them, ask questions, give ideas, say this is how I'm going to do it, and then you will be able to get a good idea about the project, which will enable you to come up with a task breakdown for the project, and then you will be able to actually set the timeline properly. Otherwise, if you just read the project idea and try to submit a project proposal, that's not going to work. You really need to engage and try and actually get started on what you need for the project. So for example, you're never going to know everything beforehand that you would need to complete a project. You need to familiarize yourself with different frameworks, technologies, libraries before you can actually even think of applying. So familiarize yourself with those and then come up with a good plan on how you're going to complete the project, and then you can come up with a task breakdown and consequently a timeline for that. Okay, Kanchana Ranasinghe wants to know, is it advisable to apply for multiple projects or focus on the best one? So I answered this earlier, but I'll try to elaborate on this again. So basically, to apply for a particular Google Summer of Code project with open source organization, it's very important that you focus very strictly on whatever project idea that you've chosen. So it's advisable to limit the amount of applications you send in as much as possible, because if you try to apply for about 5 different projects, that's going to spread out your effort over those 5 projects, which might not be enough for those organizations. So the most number of applications I generally advise someone to put in is 2. If you're going with different organizations, try 2 different applications. Don't go more than that. Generally, I wouldn't advise doing more than that, because you really need to focus and engage with the community, work hard during the application period. Like I said, it's not just about reading the application idea and then the project idea and then just submitting an application. You need to engage with the community, continuously do different development activities for the project, and then you also need to sorry, give me a second here. Okay, sorry about that. So yeah, you need to continuously engage with the community and need to continuously prove yourself as a good developer that the open source organization would be interested in getting to work for them. Okay, so some of the other questions we got on Twitter. What if my mentor is not responding to my emails? Now, this is a very important question. This actually happened to me as well the first time I was doing Summer of Code as a student. So there is really not a lot you can do in this situation, because the thing to remember about mentors is most of them are doing other jobs because they are volunteering for an open source organization. So they might not be free all the time to respond to your emails. But the important thing to do is just keep on don't get really annoying, because then that reduces your chances of getting selected. But in general, keep working on your project, on your proposal, continue working, and give a frequent update on the mailing list, because other mentors will also see and then try to help you out. They'll try to contact the mentor, they'll try to talk to them, get them to respond to your emails. Even if that mentor can't respond, then another mentor might respond to your email. So the important thing to do is continuously work. Every day, I would recommend every day you put in at least an hour of work into your Google Summer of Code application, and then try to actually follow up every day. And every day after you do a certain activity, maybe you fix a couple of bugs, maybe you came up with a design idea for the project, or maybe you came up with a structure of how you're going to structure whatever module or software or feature that you're building. So just put an update to the mailing list saying, okay, I did this, and this is how I'm planning to do, and just give an update which will be serve as a very good point towards you getting selected in the end, even if your mentor is not really responding. So Sudaraka Jaitilaka wants to know, do we have to register somewhere before submitting our proposal? How this works is Google Summer of Code has a website. So if you just search for Google Summer of Code on Google, Google Summer of Code 2017 on Google, you'll get a website which is Google Summer of Code official website. Of course, you have to register there before you can apply. That is where you have to upload your application and maintain your history of your application, and where your mentors will also look at your application. So that's where you need to register and upload the application. But of course, the important thing, like I said, is to engage with the community, which will be elsewhere and not on that site. Indunil Madhuranga wants to know, can we prove our enrollment with our university ID card? Yes, definitely. So what I did was I just took a photo of my university ID and submitted. That's not something to really worry about. Just take a photo of your uni ID and you can submit that. Okay, some of the other questions we got on Twitter are, how do I choose an organization or a project? Okay, this is an important question as well. Think about a particular technology that you're at least somewhat familiar with. So I actually know people who did Google Summer of Code projects in technologies that they had no idea about, but they successfully did it. But still, I'd recommend that you go with maybe a programming language that you're at least familiar to a certain degree with. So, and the best way to choose an organization that works with this software is, like I said, go to the Google Summer of Code official website, go to the organization list, mentoring organization list, and just search for whatever technology you would like to work on. If you like to work on Python, just search for Python, and then that will give you a list of the organizations that have software running on Python. So then, based on the technology that you're familiar with, you can select a project. Okay, some of the other questions we got, how do I manage GSOC work with my university work? Okay, this is also a very good question, because so once you get selected for Google Summer of Code, of course, during the application period as well, you have to put in a lot of work. So my first application I put in when I was in third year, while I was studying for my third year second semester exams. So it's not impossible to manage with your university work. It's important to remember that if you think about it this way, we on a daily basis we spend a lot of time doing not very productive things, maybe watching movies or playing games or just sitting around. So if you can cut out 1 hour of that time daily, on a daily basis during the application period to work on your application, then it shouldn't be a big problem. It shouldn't clash with your university work as well. Then when you actually get selected, so the requirement by Google is that you work 8 hours a day on Google Summer of Code, on your Google Summer of Code project, but that's not really necessary as long as you complete your project. So the important thing is to manage your deliverables on the project rather than managing time. So sitting in front of your computer for 4 hours is not going to help your project, but if you can get a lot of work done in half an hour, that will really help. So the important thing to remember is that actually completing the work is the important thing rather than the time. So if your university work is cutting into your summer of code work time, you can actually talk to your mentor. If you have exams coming up, you can tell your mentor, okay, I have exams coming up for 2 weeks, so I'll be a bit unresponsive. It'll be hard for me to work during this time. But I will complete these things by this day, and these deliverables will be handed over to you by this day. Then the mentor will definitely be okay with it. Okay, more questions that we got were, do I need to follow an IT degree to participate in Google Summer of Code? Not at all. You only need to be enrolled in a university for any degree. Anything at all is fine, because we get different students every year from different fields. So there are some mentoring organizations related to things like bioinformatics. We've even had medical students who did Google Summer of Code. Then we've had biology students, different art students, different people who, as long as you're good at programming and can understand the basic concepts of programming and are good at programming software or working with the community, then you should be okay to do a Google Summer of Code project. So there's nothing to worry about. You don't need to be enrolled in an IT degree to do Google Summer of Code. What are the challenges of managing a GSOC project? Okay, so I think a couple of the challenges were actually covered. What if your mentor is not responding? How do you manage it with your university work? Things like that. So a lot of people, the reason that a lot of people give to me for not doing GSOC is I have to work on my project, I have exams, things like that. But it's not really a real issue, because as long as you're very familiar and very good at what you do and you can do it well, it's not about being a real ace programmer or a genius. It's just about being able to work consistently and well on something. So your time management shouldn't be a big problem. It should be very easy to do. So I did Google Summer of Code in my 3rd year and 4th year. So those were the toughest years in the university, in my university career. So I still managed to complete 2 projects, and that should be, in terms of time management, that shouldn't be a problem. Of course, if your mentor is a bit unresponsive, so one of the major issues that people get while doing Summer of Code is problems with their mentor. Some mentors are very strict, some of them are not very responsive, not very friendly. But in general, I'd say about 80% of the time, people who work in open source organizations are very friendly, very helpful. So your mentor will also be very friendly. And of course, you will end up being best friends with your mentor by the end of your project. So that's not something to really worry about. But if you do get a bad mentor, the best thing to do is work through it, because as long as you complete your project properly, no one can say anything against you. So there are other mentors in each organization who will also help you if your mentor is not doing a very good job. So don't worry about it. Some of the other challenges you get stuck, right? You get stuck with a problem. Of course, in this scenario, the best thing to do is ask the community or the mentor. In an open source community, asking questions is always encouraged. So if you ask a question about, so you're stuck with a particular problem, if you ask a question about it, no one is going to get mad at you or cancel your Google Summer of Code program. So all you need to do is ask the community, and they'll be able to help you. There are many channels available to get help from. You can go on live chat and ask questions. You can ask it on the mailing list, or you can ask on some organizations have forums. You can ask it there, and you can very easily solve any programming or solution related problems that you get during your Google Summer of Code project. What are the advantages of doing a Google Summer of Code project? There are lots of advantages. So the very obvious one is that you get paid a lot. You get paid better than you'd get paid in a job in Sri Lanka, in an IT job. So you're getting paid much more than that. But it's not all about getting paid a large amount of money. It's about getting the kind of experience that you need to work in the real world as a software engineer or as a programmer. So because you're working on real software, right? You're working on real open source software that is used by millions of people around the world. Think about it. If you worked on something like Mozilla Firefox, your code, basically the code that you wrote, would help millions of people around the world browse the internet, right? If you work on something like VLC Media Player, a lot of people will be watching videos with the help of the code that you wrote. So that's a real achievement, the way I see it. Of course, the experience you get related to technology, things like version control, working with teams, working towards deadlines will really help you when you go into the IT industry to do a job as a software engineer or a programmer, because some organizations actually at this point in Sri Lanka will give you special consideration if you completed a Google Summer of Code project. For example, I work at Virtusa, so Virtusa actually gives special consideration when hiring if you've done a GSOC project. I know a few other companies like WSO2 who also give special consideration based on that. So the real world experience in programming and in software development that you get will really help you when you actually start working in the industry. And then on the other hand, if you're an academic person, there are a lot of Google Summer of Code mentoring organizations that are actually in the academic field. For example, if you consider the Large Hadron Collider in Switzerland, which is run by CERN, which is a theoretical physics lab, they are also a Google Summer of Code mentoring organization. So that's as theoretical or as academic as you could ever get. So I know a few people who actually use their Google Summer of Code experience to get into different academic scholarships. Like some of them are doing PhDs, some of them are doing MScs, and so on and so forth. So even if you're an academic, there's a huge advantage of doing Google Summer of Code. So Jude Niroshan wants to know how many students are usually selected for a project. It is basically the rules of the program state very clearly that only one person can do one project. So if you're there will not be multiple people selected for a single project idea. So that's something important to remember. Only one person will be selected if different people are applying. Multiple people will not be selected for a single project. Someone has asked on Twitter, what is the biggest challenge you faced on GSOC? I think the biggest challenge for me, every time I did Google Summer of Code, I've done it a couple of times, was the application process. So it's very important to maintain your application process very well. Actually doing the project is not, in my view, actually doing the project is not as hard as actually applying for it, because the application, there's a lot of competition, and you need to compete against a lot of different people and work really hard to convince your mentor that you're the best person to get selected. So that's the biggest challenge I've had both times. As a mentor, what do you expect when selecting a student? Okay, I think I covered a bit of this as well. So the most important thing is that you give a good application. Of course, obviously, we are going to rate you mainly on your application, but like I said, submitting an application alone will not be sufficient for this, because we also, when we see an application on the submission page, we need to have known that student. We need to know that student beforehand. It's just, if we see an application and that student has never interacted with the community, never done any work on the actual code, then that application will get rejected immediately. So the most important thing that we look for is community engagement. You have to have introduced yourself, maintained constant updates with your mentor, contacted your mentor during the application period, and also at the Sana Software Foundation, we require people to have fixed at least 2 issues on the code, on the software, and I know that a lot of other organizations follow this practice as well. We also require that, so to know that you're capable of working on this software. And then, of course, the application itself will receive consideration based on the fact whether you engage with the community properly during the application period. What are the do's and do nots in GSOC? Let's talk about the application process mainly. So in the application process, the do's are, like I said, you need to really engage with the community. A couple of good things to do are, so let's say you're working for maybe Mozilla Firefox. You're trying to apply for a project idea on Mozilla Firefox. So you've introduced yourself on the mailing list, you've engaged with the mentor, and you have an idea of how to complete the project. Everything is fine. So there might be someone else asking questions about how to install it, how do I build Firefox, how do I use this particular feature on the mailing list or on the maybe the chat channels. So to answer these questions is a very good thing to do. So to show that you're a team player, you're a member of the community. Always try to help others when you're part of a community. That is very highly looked on, because your mentor will be very impressed. The mentors in the organization will also be impressed and happy with the way you're interacting with the community. Another do is maintain a good relationship with your mentor, but don't go chasing after the mentor. Once the mentor talks to you, you can build up a relationship and you can discuss the project and maintain a good relationship. Some of the don'ts are, don't be annoying or don't be very over persistent. Don't send about 5 emails a day asking about different things or saying, why is the mentor not responding to me? Don't do things like that. Don't be rude to other people in the community. That normally is an instant disqualification if you're rude to someone. Be very polite. Of course, don't refer to anyone in the community as sir or madam, just first name basis, please, because don't maintain that kind of hierarchy in open source organizations. Those are some of the don'ts that things that you should not do during your GSOC application period. Do you want to prepare any demo prototype before the proposal submission? So some of the organizations will require this from you, but most of them do not. But it's always a good idea to actually start building some of the components of your project. It's always a very good idea to do that. So how this works is, once the applications close, there is actually a period of time where the applications are evaluated. There's about a month. Right? So the important thing is not to go silent during this month. You don't just submit your application and disappear. During that month, just start working on the project, or continue fixing bugs, or engaging with the community. Just stay around, which will really contribute towards you getting selected. So for example, when I did my first Summer of Code project, I finished about 1/8 of the actual project before I even got selected. So that really contributes towards you getting selected, because you built some of the feature, or you've done some of the project, right? How can they not select you after that? So the important thing to remember is that it's good. It's not required that you build a prototype or a demo before you apply, but it's always a good idea. It's not required, but it's a good idea. What if I am not accepted the first time? Okay, so it's very important not to get discouraged if you don't get accepted. So the first time I applied was in second year. I applied to an organization called Geeklog. They're a CMS based on PHP. So in that application, that application was very bad. I didn't know any of these the ways to engage with the community. I didn't know a lot of the technology. So it was a bad application and I didn't get selected. But that didn't discourage me. I applied in my third year and I got selected. So as long as you have more years left as long as you have more years left in your university career, you should apply every year and not be discouraged if you don't get selected. So someone has asked, I have only worked in Java. Can I select a project on other languages and learn on the go? Okay, so there are a lot of projects, Google Summer of Code mentoring organizations that accept Java, that have Java as a programming language. But if you want to learn something new, it's doable. I know a lot of people who learn technology while applying for their Summer of Code project. A lot of people actually. Most of the time you'll be learning a lot of new frameworks. Even if you're doing a Java project, you'll be learning a lot of new frameworks, new libraries, things like that when you're applying for GSOC. So it's okay to try and learn something while you're applying or during the project itself, but it's generally recommended to go with a programming language that you at least know beforehand, at least have a basic knowledge on. Because having to learn a programming language as well might be a bit of a burden, because you will have to learn a lot of different frameworks within that language as well to do a successful summer of code project. Can I contribute for a project outside of GSOC? How would that work? Of course, these are open source organizations, right? Open source organizations always accept contributors. So one of the easiest ways to find an open source organization to contribute to is to go on the Google Summer of Code website and search for different organizations on maybe different technologies. Select one of those and you can still engage with that community. Even if it's not for Google Summer of Code, you can contribute to a community. So for example, I contribute like that to the Moodle organization. So I'm not engaged with any GSOC work with them, but I still contribute. So that was one of so always open source organizations will accept contributors, individual contributors who are not part of the organization, and eventually you might even become a part of the organization as well. So of course you can contribute to an open source organization outside of Google Summer of Code. Okay. Another nice question we got was, how should I handle when there are multiple students working on the same proposal? Okay, obviously there are going to be other people who also apply for this project idea that you're trying to apply for, right? So it's very important not to get intimidated